I want to say thank you. Welcome. Everybody's coming in. This is super exciting. My name is Sarah, and we are going to begin pretty quickly. And my my attention differences are going to the joining room. I'm just so excited that everybody's coming. Um, yeah. Kate, are you ready to start?
Yeah, I'm ready to start. I'm going to keep my microphone on mute unless I'm speaking, just to minimize the feedback.
Okay.
And focus on getting everyone in so that you can concentrate on the other things.
You're amazing. I appreciate you. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and share the screen. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, wait, take two. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. Okay, let's put this into a slideshow. We're ready to go. Ooh, I made my slideshow look funny. Anyways, I made it in the wrong corner. There it goes. Well, everybody, hello. My name is Sarah Salvaggi Hernandez. Wait, go forward. That's me. I am many things, but today I'm here basically as an autistic person. I am committed to showing up fully, being my happy, flappy self, and in order to kind of support me in those endeavors, I've invited Kate Jones.
Hi.
So Kate Jones is my partner in AutConnect and all sorts of things, and we are here together to present making sense of sensory. And it's actually something that Kate and I have talked about for years and years together. And Kate, I just want to say I super appreciate all the conversations because it's helped me to refine what I'm going to say today. Just a brief introduction to me. I am autistic, I am deaf, I am an OT. Put it all together, I'm the autistic OT. I'm not the only autistic OT. I'm happy to say there's so many of us already and more each day. But I am in particular fully committed to making sure that I provide sensory supports and sensory access to neurodivergent beings. And I pretty much spend my entire day doing that. Kate, can I ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm an autistic psychotherapist and I work in private practice with adults and young people. Most of them, in fact, if not all at the moment, are neurodivergent and mostly autistic. I'm also the Chief Communications Officer for Neuroclastic, which is mine and Sarah's big passion. So I do all sorts of stuff and things in all sorts of places.
All sorts of places. So I'm on the advisory board of Neuroclastic. If y'all don't know what Neuroclastic is, we invite you to check it out because it's a super rad space. First, I want to, like I've already said hello. Please, my request. Please use the chat. One of the things and one of the reasons I have Kate here is Kate is over in the UK, and whenever I go to presentations with Kate, they're so chatty and I totally enjoy it. And I don't know if any of you here are have to go to continuing ed here in the States, but the ones in the States, people are pretty quiet. And so I want to challenge the people over in the United States to chat it up a little bit today. So the first thing that I'm going to ask is if you want to say hello in the chat, just let us know where you're from. You can be as autistic as you like. So if you want to tell me you are from your couch right now, that's fine. Or you're welcome to tell us a city, state, country, existential space. So yeah, just drop those in the chat. while people are letting us know who they are, where they're coming from. Now I'm singing Backstreet Boys in my head, but what we're going to focus on are the agreements. So while we're in this space, what I want you to understand is, again, I am autistic. And so the space that I'm holding and curating and protecting here is a little bit like my living room. And so these are my house rules, if you will. Now, I say rules, they're agreements. Maybe I realize that many people in my audience, especially if you are neurodivergent, may be PDA, which means pathological demand avoidance, which means if I ask you or tell you, or if I tell you that I'm going to do something, or you have to do something, it never goes well. So here's just, these are my requests to you while we are in this space together, though, and I would really appreciate if we all honored them, which include, I will use identity first language. So therefore, I will say I'm autistic. I will say I'm a neurodivergent person. I will speak in ways that are neurodiverse affirming of who I am. So if you are somebody, if you like are on the spectrum or you identify as being a person with autism, that's totally awesome. It's your right to do so. I am not about telling anybody how to live their lives, but in my living room, I just prefer identity first language and things to stay neurodiversity affirming. Another thing is that you will not hear us talk about use functional labels today. If a conversation happens to come around those types of things, probably like we're going to use like support needs. Functioning labels are seen as damaging to the neurodivergent community because it both denies access and denies competent, like people presuming competence of other people. So it's very hurtful to our community in a wide range of ways. So some of you are here and you've been in the neurodivergent community for so long, and these things seem simple to you or something that like maybe we already know. But there are people here who are used to being in more neuronormative context. And so some of the things that you hear today are going to diverge from the neuronorm. And that is going to be, or potentially will be, uncomfortable. What I want to say is that you're welcome to sit with the discomfort. Change happens in many different ways, in many different spaces. And part of changing is being uncomfortable, maybe even being angry, maybe even being in denial. So if you hear something I say today and you're like, no way, nope, cool. Well, we're on our way to change, whatever that might be. But that being said, if anything today is dysregulating to the point where you don't feel safe, you notice certain body sensations that are intensely uncomfortable for you, please, please, please take a break, take a pause, go get a drink. Kate and I both have our tea. So anytime I, need to have a regulation break, I will take a sip of tea. If I need to leave, I absolutely will leave. And I know that you'd be in great hands, but I don't plan on leaving. However, if you need to leave, you're welcome to leave. You can come right back in. By the end of the week, there will be a recording available of this. So don't worry if you are not able to attend for the whole time. No worries at all. The reason that it will be at the end of the week is that I am going to pay to have somebody fix my transcript and put correct captions. That is my goal for this week. And so I want to give time and space that I can make sure to edit the transcript and put correct captions into this before I send the recording out. I see so much chatter already. Whoop, whoop. Oh my goodness, I'm super excited. So we're just going to begin. We're going to get into it. Kate, just so you all know what to expect, Kate's going to let me know a lot of things. But one of them is when we're at the 45-minute mark and we will have a short break for 5 minutes. The other thing, and Kate actually doesn't know this, but we have a special guest at the end. So hopefully we definitely will go through this all and get to our special guest, and hopefully we will have a chance for questions at the end. But
Sarah, will people get the slides afterwards?
yes. Yes, you will get a PDF of the slides as well. There's also additional resources that are coming about. Y'all, this is good stuff. I can't wait to share it with you, but I have a lot of things that I want to share. But I decided that this was only going to be an hour and a half. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an abbreviated version today. But what I want to say to you is this. Please trust me. There's people here, I swear on everything, that have known me for a really long time and know how sacred this is to me. I believe that we are all sensory beings and we are all born into part of our birthright is self-actualization, like knowing who we are. And because I believe that as sensory beings, we know who we are, this information is so critical to get out, because I find that in the neurodivergent population, we especially have been lied to about what we have felt, the reality of what we have felt, the intensity of what we have felt. And many of us have had to live lives where we suppressed that truth. And so I don't think that that's like, I know that that's not true. And I'm really proud and happy that we're all here to disrupt some systems. So here we go. Sensory processing is a relatively new theory, which is remarkable to say, but it's relatively new. Winnie Dunn in 1997 built on work by from another woman named Jean Ayres, who had this radical idea and backed it up with neuroscience that said people have sensory systems and they work, and they have an impact on the way you perceive the world inside and outside of your body. And those perceptions then impact the ways that you engage with things and places and people and systems inside and outside of your body. So it's pretty simple, but what I want to say, it's also very complex. So here's what happens though. Very simply, sensory information gets picked up by sensory receptors of some system. So if I'm talking, let's say, olfactory, I'm talking about the olfactory receptors that are in my nose and some on my tongue too. Wild stuff. But anyway, it brings in, oh, got someone. Well, I just have to please make sure you guys stay muted. Thank you. But the sensory information gets picked up by the receptors, and that information then is transmitted from the sensory receptors.
I don't know.
Got it. Transmitted from the sensory receptors and travels up a neural pathway to your brain. And once that sensory information reaches your brain, it's then processed by your brain. So the sensory information from my nose travels all the way to my brain and makes a first stop at the amygdala, which is the fight, flight, fright center of your brain. And once the amygdala, I like to call Miss Mygdala, but once Miss Mygdala lets me know that this information is safe and that I don't need to take like an immediate reaction, then it allows it to go further into my brain where I process it against considering the physical factors that I might be seeing, I might be smelling, I might be interacting with, and then pairing that with previous experiences. So where have I smelled this information or this particular sensory stimuli before? Once my brain gathers all that information, then my brain communicates to my body, hey, this is what I want you to do. And then theoretically, my body responds to my brain and says, okay, sure, that's what I will do. What I want to say is that super simplistic, in each one of those steps, there is a lot that can go super right, and there's a lot that can go super wrong. There could be things that happen that veer off course a little bit or really enhance your experience. There's absolutely, and we all experience these things differently. Ooh, boo, boo. But neurodivergent people, we experience them super differently, right? 2 standard deviations, Kate, that's statistically significant. That's us.
It is.
We literally, many of us do so that it's what's known in fancy theory world as 2 standard deviations outside of the norm, which is just a way of saying that it's only experienced by 2% of the population. Kate, I don't know if that's true. I think more people have experience sensory differently, but what it's going to take is to change the paradigm that we currently live in and accept that people have sensory experiences, and those sensory experiences are neurological events that are real. Because neurodivergent people have consistently had that narrative twisted for us, we have become hyposensitive, meaning that we are either hypersensitive, we respond too readily to sensory, or hyposensitive, meaning that we need so much sensory before we're even aware. We seem like we're just we're quote unquote, ableism alert, I'm sorry, but from another planet. We might be though. We might be. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that so many of us have been told that we are wrong for the way that we experience. And it's very confusing, Kate, because we really do know what we experience. And because we have had our true experiences questioned and doubted, and then we start to doubt and we start to gaslight ourselves. Neurodivergent people also experience chronic habituation and chronic dysregulation. Chronic habituation means that things are happening to us outside of our body and we get used to them. We acclimate to them. But the reality is that might be true. We might actually change our response so that we no longer notice, but it still has a tremendous physiological impact on our bodies. If you get used to the sound of a jackhammer on the street at a physiological level, that is still going to have an impact and a dysregulation on the systems of your body, even if you're used to it. Same with dysregulation. So many people, especially neurodivergent people, are chronically dysregulated. What happens? Kate, I have bad news. So many of us have autoimmune, PTSD that we don't need. That's what I need to say is we actually don't need, if we could just be accommodated for these differences, we don't need them. Anxiety, depression, gastrointestinal issues, mental illness. It changes our brain. So Kate, ready? I did this for you.
Did what?
I want to flip that. All right. I want to flip that because like I said, we don't have to live this way. If we come into this world and we know who we are and we know what we need and we know what's right for us and what's wrong for us, what feels good and what doesn't feel good, we don't need the disorder that comes along with it. And that is why, Kate Jones, I actually don't talk a lot about sensory processing disorder because I don't want people to believe that sensory processing disorder is a feature or part of being neurodivergent. I really don't want those things to be connected because I believe that the way that we experience and the way that we feel and notice patterns, we're incredibly sensitive, we're intuitive, we're analytical, we are the experts, and we see things and experience things in ways that 98% of the population do not experience. 98% of the population do not see what we see. 98% do not hear what we hear. But we can be the people, like I always say, like the emperor's naked, like we're the kids in the crowd of the emperor's new clothes saying, you know what, all this noise constantly in a workplace makes it difficult to concentrate. Maybe we should accommodate for that. Right? And the reality is when we provide sensory supports, modifications, and accommodations, then the way that we process sensory information may not be disordered. Does that make sense? I think so, Kate. What do you think? Ooh, are you frozen? Oh, shoot. I think Kate's frozen. I'm going to check in the chat. Does that make sense to you that, like, yes, we can talk about sensory processing disorder, but I don't want to confuse and say that the neurodivergent way of experiencing sensory is disordered? I like that. Okay. Yes. Cool. 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 All right. Yay. Good. Then I'm going to keep going. Oh, oh, oh. In sensory processing, I'm going to tell you 3 terms today. They're the only terms I want you to hear. They're the only things that I want you to remember. The thing that I love about sensory processing is it's super simple. 3 terms. There's first one, well, actually, it's the second one we'll talk about, is thresholds. Passive strategies and active strategies. Thresholds, passive strategies, active strategies. A passive strategy is a way to provide support to a sensory system that is built into the environment. It is something that is already done. It is a way of setting up the system so that someone can be successful. It's a way of creating supports around us so that an individual doesn't need to worry about providing for themselves or for accessing something for themselves. So, for example, a passive strategy that I use is visually, I get very dysregulated very quickly, and especially with so many Zoom sessions and seeing everybody around. And so one thing that I did, because my visual threshold system was so overloaded by having what used to be a really panoramic visual experience condensed into a little teeny tiny computer screen. And that's hurting my eyes, right? So I need to remind myself to take eye breaks and eye movement breaks and get more range of motion for my eye movements. A passive strategy is this strip of LED lights that I have behind me, because at any time I can actually, and I do, well, run my eyes over that strip of lights, boom, 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 boom. And it's something that gives my eyes a little movement. It's something for me to anchor to. That's a passive strategy. It's set up for me in my environment to help me achieve success. There's other types of strategies called active strategies. Active strategies are things that we use in the moment. It's about movement, it's about creation, it's about creating temporary solutions. So if you notice that either you're dysregulated or you need something more, active strategies are what you use. We need both, and the same thing can be both. So, for example, like I said, these lights right here are a passive strategy that I use, that I have set up for myself for the environment. That's an example of a passive strategy. An active strategy would be me taking a break and looking and going, in a linear motion and looking at my lights to help me calm down. I'm going to say that one more time, but I want to check in with the chat to make sure that that also makes sense, that something can be both an active and passive strategy. It just depends on how you're using it. Passive, set up in the environment for success. Active is using strategies in the moment. Check in the chat. Okay, good. Ooh, I see so many good comments, and I'm definitely going to be making sure I get back to those. I'm actually going to take, I want to make sure that Kate is not in the waiting room. Nope. Okay. So we will move on. But what I want to say too is we're going to have so many examples of these after our break. So you will see these terms over and over again and be provided with direct examples and strategies that you can use today. So strategies: passive, active, threshold. Okay. Every single sensory system in your body has either a low threshold or a high threshold or somewhere in between. You may see these in the literature or in graphics or memes, and it says hyper and hyposensitive. Again, I don't prefer to use those words because they indicate or suggest disorder. And so very simply, I say low threshold, and so does sensory processing. Low threshold, high threshold. A low threshold is what people sometimes think of as hyposensitive. Or I'm sorry, excuse me, see, I get them mixed up. Hypersensitive, hyper vigilant. So a low threshold system only needs a little bit of information to wake up, to be aware. It can be easily overwhelmed, and people can appear rigid around those sensory preferences. So, for example, again, I talk about my olfactory low threshold all the time because it's a serious issue. And so I can appear rigid if I'm in a situation where I'm overwhelmed by scent. I can already tell my voice gets like nervous, even just thinking about it. And it's not that I'm inflexible, yada, yada. It's actually that I'm trying to protect myself from neurological dysregulation of my low threshold system because it's a neurological event and it does lead to things like migraines, stomach upset, et cetera, et cetera. So it's important to protect low threshold systems. It's also important to nourish low threshold systems because low threshold systems are going to be those systems that give you the most intense amount of joy for a little bang, like little buck, little bit, little buck, big bang. Oh my goodness, I can't remember how it goes. Here's an example way back to my olfactory, right? Whew, peppermint, favorite. Love the smell of peppermint essential oil. Because my olfactory system has such a low threshold, it only takes a little bit of this sent to really activate my system and have me become aware of it. The other side of that spectrum is high threshold. So you could also have a high threshold system. A high threshold system is like a great big old bucket, a big coffee cup. Low thresholds are tiny teacups. High thresholds, you need a lot of information to come in to support you. You need lots of new information because while you're getting all this information, you have such a high need that you're actually habituating, meaning like you're getting used to sensory information really fast. So not only do you need a lot of information, but you need a lot of new information. For me, proprioception. We'll talk about what that is, but I need cues for where my body is at all times. And so I have strategies like I wear my hoodie, my little duster, and I can actually pull on this, give myself input to meet that really big bucket need. People who have been diagnosed with ADHD, ADHDers, if you're autistic and ADHD, we call it ADHD, which I think is super cute. So a lot of people here are ADHDs. We have big buckets for movement. That's why we wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, what? Can't get enough. No, you neurologically cannot get enough. You need more to sustain your threshold. But what I want to tell you is that when you sustain, meet, and protect your threshold needs, that is the magic behind regulating yourself for whatever comes next. If it is communication, if it's going to the store, if it is whatever it is, when your thresholds are met, you're able to engage in the things that you need to do and want to do from a very grounded and intentional space. And thresholds can and do change. Yes, that's a little annoying. I know. Because what happens is that things that didn't bother you before suddenly seem to bother you. Why? Your threshold changed. So the thing that I want you all to really kind of grab onto is that systems thresholds change. And what you should be aware of are two things. One, what's your set point? So if you know, for me, for my olfactory system, I have a set point. It's a very low threshold. And what are my signs of dysregulation? Because that is a cue to you that your thresholds are changing and that you may need totally different things in that moment. Important to remember. Because we all have sensory profiles. What's a sensory profile? Well, it's all your systems, what your threshold is, what's your set point for that system, be it your olfactory, touch, taste, hearing, proprioception, we're going to talk about those. And what type of strategies do you prefer? Do you prefer passive strategies or do you prefer active strategies for your threshold? Some people really prefer to have their environment set up for success because they want to kind of be contained. And so passive strategies are going to be their preference. Other people need more active, engaging, doop-a-doo, right? It's just a preference. We need both. But the sensory profile will tell you what your threshold is and what your preference for strategies are. And when you know this information, you can simply use it to set yourself up for sensory success so that you can regulate and engage in the things that you need and want to do. And what I want to reinforce is that it is your right to do so in a regulated manner. You have a right to regulation. Some people are going to be like, you know what? No, I don't. And that might be true. You may be in a situation that you don't have choices, you don't have the resources, you don't have the supports, but I'm here to say that you do, as a human being, deserve them. And one of the ways that we change this, we talked about passive strategies and having like context and environment and things like that, is that we can all be a part of changing the paradigm that these are like nicey nice things for us. Sensory supports and accommodations and modifications are essential. Not something that you really should have to ask for, and we do. I see it is almost time for our break. These are the sensory systems that we're going to talk about: touch, hearing, sight, smell, taste, proprioception, vestibular, and interoception. We're going to give definitions, but I am stunning myself and ending a little, well, not ending, pausing a little bit early. So I'm going to look and see if there's any questions, concerns, but in about 5 minutes, we are going to take our break. So, Kate, are you able, actually, let me stop sharing. Where are you? Oh no, I've completely lost my Zoom. Oh, there it is. Hi, everybody. Kate, are you able, are there any questions that? Oh, your sound is not working. Okay, no problem. So a question about thresholds and what makes them change. There's a lot of things that can make your threshold change. Like, number one, let's first start let's start here. You can have, like, you can be born with a brain that has more sensitive thresholds. So a lower thresholds or higher threshold, like whatever your brain is, that's what you're born is. And one thing that is important for me to say is that that's a perfect right way to have a brain. So no brains are wrong, all brains are included. You could be born with those thresholds. Those thresholds could also come about because of some change, some event that has changed. It can be an experience or an event. So maybe something you had was a super positive experience, and it really changes the way that you associate that sensory information. You could also have something that is a very traumatic experience, and that can too change the way that your brain processes and associates that sensory information. Other ways that are reasons why it changes, your sensory systems can and do change because of trauma. They can, like, like physical trauma, like a TBI, or it could be experiential trauma. It can be because of just brain differences. There's a lot of reasons why your brain can be different. One. Other things that can change your threshold are time of day. Like, the way that you experience sensory in the morning is different than the way that you experience sensory at night, because you've been experiencing stuff all day long. And that will literally change your threshold. One of the most interesting things to me ever, I had a friend who I did a sensory profile on, just right, like, and that, like, regular. And then 2 years later, I did the sensory profile on her when she was pregnant. And her thresholds literally switched, because her interoceptively, her entire self, everything had changed. So her thresholds had actually changed because of pregnancy. I see thresholds change all the time because of medication. Either you're using medication or medication is wearing off. If your interoceptive systems are off, it will change all your other exteroceptive sensory systems. So meaning if something's wrong inside, like if I'm hungry or if I'm anxious or if I'm tired or if I'm sick, it's going to change the way that I'm taking in information outside of my body. So, for example, when I'm sick, my auditory threshold gets even lower because inside I'm dysregulated and it's immediately changed my brain. So, nothing like, and I'll use this example with my family all the time. I'll be like, my auditory bucket is full. And it's because I'm sick. It's literally nothing that they are doing. There's nothing that they're doing that is wrong. I just have a different threshold and I need to meet my needs. Yeah, lots of reasons. Lots of reasons thresholds can change. And then pain, right, Kat. Okay. Yes. Menopause. I don't have a uterus anymore. I got rid of mine this summer. Yes, changes are definitely changes. And the reason I talk about this kind of stuff is that literally it's just your brain. It's not like, people attach personality characteristics to changes in threshold when it's just your brain. I'm not, well, maybe I am a diva. That's not bad. But yeah, absolutely. The way that my body is experiencing something is changing, and I need to be able and empowered and supported to meet my needs, my sensory needs. Same with everybody else. That's why, like, one of the reasons I want to talk about people, like, once you understand it is your innate right to just experience your own sensory information, you understand that in other people. So if you, yeah, oh my gosh, I could go on forever. It's break time. So it's 2:44. I feel like I'm so compelled to wait till 2:45. We will come back at 2:49 though, probably 2:50. No, we're just gonna come back at 2:50 because I can't stand that. We'll be back at 2:50. Keep chatting, stretch, wiggle, giggle, do what you need to do, and then come back at 3 o'clock. This is just a test. Kate, can you hear me?
I can. Oh, thank goodness. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Woohoo!
It's much easier to do this when I can see and hear it. That's what I found out.
You can, yep. Yes. Oh, I should have said that. Yeah, definitely, y'all. Autism does not speak for me. Boo.
Tommy. Ooh.
Oh man. All right, it's 2:50. You ready?
Yeah. Do you want there was a good question. Do you want it now?
Yes.
Fidgets, active or passive strategy. And then I thought that would be a really great way you could talk about how something could be both, depending on how you set it up.
So true. Yes. So let's talk about fidgets as a passive strategy. Couple of ways fidgets can be a passive strategy. One, uno, passive strategy by simply having them available in the environment. So when you have them, like I have, what's my favorite fidget currently? This one. Oh, I'm looking at it because it's got like sparkles, anyways. And my son's an owl. Like that's his, like he loves owls. So, anyways, so it is a passive strategy for me simply to have this here. One. Another example of a passive strategy would be the fact that I have set up my environment to be pro STEM, free the STEM. So therefore, the attitude in this this space is STEMmy STEM STEM. Therefore, people don't have to worry about whether or not it's okay for them to STEM. In fact, they know it's okay for them to STEM. And so therefore they have more neurological resources to simply enjoy the experience, right? Passive strategies. Active strategy would be actually using the STEM, using it in a new way is another idea of an active strategy. Like obviously I was looking at this and using it as a visual strategy before, but now I'm playing. Ooh. Anyways, love it. Okay. Does that help? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right. I'm so excited for the next part. Only because this is a specific section that I really worked hard because I wanted to change it. And I'm going to change it some more. But okay. Kate, I have something really exciting to tell you. I just checked during the break and I'm going to share with everybody. So first, before I begin, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everybody who's here. I had a super like stretch goal for tickets for people who are coming, and I passed 200. That was my stretch goal. So I'm really grateful for everybody here for being supportive, and pink cheeks. I have pink cheeks. I'm so happy. Moving on, we're going to talk about sensory systems. There's so many, and there's so many ways that we know them, we understand them. There's different ways that people talk about sensory systems in the literature, but just to keep it focused on the sensory profile, sensory processing as laid out by Winnie Dunn, the systems that we're going to talk about include touch, hearing, sight, smell, taste, proprioception, vestibular, and interoception. The first 5 people feel pretty comfortable with because it's what we're taught in kindergarten and or early on, like in your educational experience often is taught. But like what I want to kind of highlight for these big 5 senses, as I call them, touch, sight, yada, yada, is that there's a lot of things that go into the sensation of touch. So again, it's not just the receptors, it's what you are touching, it is how your neural pathways are working. There's a neuroceptive component, which is speaking to the way that you understand sensory information. And then there's also sensory modulation and sensory integration. So the way that we move our bodies inside and out, it's so complex. And that's why it's so important. That's why we really need to reinforce for institutions and systems that the way that like we are experiencing these big five more intensely than 98% of the population. So we really need support to be able to access. Proprioception is a system that I feel like people are starting to get a better sense of, right? Proprioception is the feelings that you get in the joints and the muscles of your body. The proprioception really helps you to understand where your body is. So, for example, if I push down on my desk, the information that I get when I push down into my hands, there's 26 joints in my hands. Isn't that amazing? There's so many. Same with my feet. Lots of proprioceptive opportunities in my hands, in my elbow, in my shoulder, all over. I have proprioceptive receptors in the joints and the muscles of my body to help me to understand where my body is. I am here. The boundaries of my body, proprioception. People also talk about proprioception when they're talking about ways to engage in strategies. It's called heavy work, deep pressure. It's really about pushing and pulling on your body so that you understand the boundaries of your body. The next sense is the vestibular sense. This is the sense with movement, and it kind of, so it talks about basically the ways that your body is moving. So the vestibular receptors are located in the inner ear. Kate, our receptors are, they need help because we have ear stuff. And so therefore, not only is our ear stuff impacted by our ear stuff, but our sense of movement is also impacted. And so vestibular input comes in many ways, shapes and forms. It's moving in a line, front, back, it's moving side to side, it's spinning in a circle, it's moving in an orbit, it's inverting, going upside down. All these types of input help us to understand where our body is in space, because our brain always wants our gaze, our eyes, to orient to the horizon. That sounds so romantic. Our body wants to stay focused on the horizon. And so therefore, we have systems in place to make sure that we understand how our bodies are moving. Interoception. This is the new one, the new hotness in sensory world. We're talking like shockingly, but apparently we have the sensations inside of our body and they're important. So from things like, do I have to go to the bathroom? Do I need to eat? Do I need to drink? Am I dehydrated? Maybe. Let me take a drink. Am I sick? Am I anxious? Emotions also have an impact on the way that I experience things inside of my body. So interoception is a really super big, broad umbrella that we are just starting to really understand because, somebody decided finally that it was important to know when you're hungry. So here's where we get into the good stuff. I challenged myself, Kate, only one example because I could go on forever and ever and ever. And what I want to tell you, Kate, you don't actually know this yet. And you haven't agreed to do this with me yet. So don't don't feel like you have to. But every single Sunday in April, I for sure am coming back. And I am expanding these workshops. We're going to be keeping talking about the same thing over and over, but each workshop is going to have a different focus so that we can go into more specific strategies. I just really want people to understand this. And so I'm going to give everybody a lot of opportunities to understand it. So I'm starting here first. With your touch system, you could have a low threshold, you can have a high threshold. I don't know what you do. I'm going to be sending resources. One, free resources that you can take and get a really good idea of what your thresholds are and your preferences are for strategies. Free resource, they're not perfect, but they're good. And also links to, I do provide the sensory profile report, which costs money, but I find it very valuable. But in your touch system, tactile system, you can have a low threshold, a high threshold. If you have a low threshold over here on this side, an active strategy to help support your low threshold would be to put on a hoodie. So say you're in an environment and things and people are moving around you and there's the potential for you to be touched, which is gross. If you don't like that type of touch, put a hoodie on. Okay. An example of a passive strategy is wear the hoodie always. Always have your hoodie. Carry it with you. Have it be around your head, like put it in your bag. Always so having that hoodie is a passive strategy to help support your low threshold needs, and wearing a hoodie is an example of an active strategy to help support those needs. Then an active strategy for somebody who has a high threshold, move away and move to and move. People who have high thresholds have great big old buckets. They want to be touched. They want to touch. And so the more that you give them permission and opportunities for movement, the better regulated they're going to be. A passive strategy for somebody who likes to be touched is when you need to get their attention, touch them, tap their shoulder with their permission. These are things that you have to talk about. But for someone who really enjoys touch them. For the hearing system, if you have a super low threshold, again, passive strategies, have your ear defenders with you in a bag. If anybody tells you that ear defenders are weird, then you can give them whatever look you want to give them, because they're not. They're cool as heck. You look boss. Wear your ear defenders if you want to. I think they're great. So it doesn't matter what they think. Again, an example of changing the paradigm, changing the expectations. It's totally normal to meet your sensory needs, including wearing ear defenders if you need to. People who have low thresholds, what you need to notice or know about them is that they might actually notice their name being called right away. Like, even though I have a very low auditory threshold, and even though I am deaf, I can pick a Sarah up from like the corners. Like, I don't know. I that particular sound, because I'm so hyper vigilant to it, because I have such a low threshold and I know it's something that I need to pay attention to. I understand the sounds of Sarah. For somebody who has a high threshold, just know these people might be humming, whistling, singing. Why? Because they like noise. And if you're not going to make the noise, they're going to make the noise. And what is important to say is this is a real neurological need for them. So, like, for example, my son all day long, he hums, he whistles, he sings. And if I have an issue because I have a low threshold, I need to do things to tend to my own self, because I am supporting my son who has a very high threshold and needs to use a lot of different active strategies. Some ways that I can support my low threshold needs are setting compassionate boundaries. I like you really do have a right to boundary, you have a right to negotiate, and you really need to create the spaces where it's comfortable and supported for you to be empowered to advocate for yourself. A high threshold passive strategy, people they might not hear the first time you say something to them, the second time you say something to them, the third time you say something, they might be like, huh? That's okay. Just know that okay, what I verbally said to you did not meet your threshold need, and neurologically you couldn't hold on to what I said to you. Again, sensory strategies are not just about the sensory, but it's also about the way that we understand. And so it's important to create neurodivergent and neurodiversity affirming spaces. Um, so we can use these strategies. Sites, active strategy for a low threshold, close the curtains. A passive strategy would be having room darkening shades available. If you have an high threshold, a active strategy for you might be to open the curtains, let more light in. A passive strategy would be like, for example, my lights could be flashing, something more to meet my threshold needs. For smell olfactory, the one that I think I talk the most about, an active strategy, somebody who has a low threshold is going to smell it first. Believe them. Believe them, they smell it, right? They're going to smell it first. Passive strategies, nose plugs. Don't like nobody should take offense. You might need nose plugs. That might be a real thing, and that might it should be accommodated and respected. People who have high thresholds and a preference for active strategies, they are the people who are going to smell it last because they didn't make it. Maybe. Um, so they need a lot more stimulation. They need a lot more smells in their environment before they are even aware of a smell. Just know that. Why could this be important? Number one, well, there's a lot of reasons, but let's like in a serious kind of sense, what if food is burning? Somebody who has a high threshold and a preference for active strategies needs to know they've got to set themselves up for success with more passive strategies, like going to check their cooking to make sure they're not burning things, because they are not going to notice that there's the smell of smoke until a while because they have a high threshold. Passive strategies, again, I put covering your nose. I know that seems like it's an active strategy, but the reason I put it in passive is more about like the attitude of like it's not rude for somebody who has a noxious stimuli to protect themselves from that noxious stimuli. And we need to have more of an honest conversation about that. Taste, again, somebody who has low threshold and active strategy for you would be to meal prep because you know what you like and you can eat what you like, and you should be empowered to prepare the things that you actually like to eat. A passive strategy, this is an interesting one that I put here only because low threshold passive strategy, somebody might refuse to brush their teeth. Why? Over and over and over again. I've had this happen where somebody just didn't, like at baseline, we're like, nope, I'm going to not brush my teeth. Well, the reason was they had a low threshold and they did not have toothpaste, or the toothpaste that they had was completely noxious to them tasting, like it burned them. And so even though they had other choices for toothpaste, this, that, and the other, currently they didn't before. And so they continued the strategy of refusing to brush their teeth because that was literally a protective way of not getting noxious stimuli in their mouth. High threshold active strategy, do a meal exchange. Now that the vid is like calming down a little bit, this is still actually a safe way. But if you need to have different tastes, experience different things, find people in your local community and agree to swap meals. Do like a potluck swap of frozen meals once a week. And that will really help you to have lots of taste experiences and experience a lot of different things. Passive strategy for high threshold, the more spice, the better. That means go get and make sure that you have all types of spices available for you. It's really important. Okay. Da, da, da. Proprioception. People who have low thresholds and active preference for active strategies find that they're very spastic, and they often clench their muscles and they don't even know why. Why? Because there's something that is making them feel uncomfortable, and automatically they're starting to clench up. A passive strategy for somebody who has a low threshold could be every single social event, making sure that you put lotion on before, because putting lotion on, especially on your hands, is a great way to give really firm pressure to, again, 26 joints in each hand of your body. It's a great space for very concentrated proprioceptive input. Activity for people who have high thresholds for proprioception, I put head banging, and it was so interesting because I actually meant like rocking out, like. But some people do sometimes will hit their head. But what I'm referring to is head banging. It's still a proprioceptive strategy. It's great if you make sure that you keep yourself safe. One thing that I talk about, if you notice that you have a lot of need to bang on your head or shake your head, acknowledge and validate that as a real neurological necessity and provide safer alternatives for yourself. So for example, something that we do in our house is we do head squishes. Anybody can get a head squish. I could get one, my son could get one, my husband, anybody. But very simply putting pressure to the front and the sides of our heads as many times and as intense as we need it. The joints in your skull are the strongest joints of your body. And so it's a great space to get proprioception. Another way that I tend to do this is wear a scarf over my head and pull down, or you could wear a hoodie and like make your little cocoon with your hoodie. A passive strategy, and this is only if people are okay with it, but being okay with touching other people in conversations. Some people who have high threshold needs, you'll find that they are often putting their hand on your shoulder or something. Number one, make sure that you set your boundaries and your limitations in the beginning, but you might have some friends especially where it's okay to touch each other a little bit more. It's okay to lean against each other. It's okay to do that. And when you have those conversations, you can just plan for being able to have those needs met in that way. Vestibular, low threshold, and active strategy is bike riding. Why is this for low threshold? Because bike riding, you keep your head relatively stable and move in a linear direction, meaning you move in a line. You're not going round and round. So that's a really great low threshold active strategy. A passive strategy would be having something like a pool membership. Pools are great, again, place where you can actually keep your head pretty stable. And the water also helps you to keep your body at the horizon. So again, having that as an option for you. An active strategy for somebody who has a high threshold, stand on your head, flip. Do it over and over again. If you're having trouble, if you're struggling with focus, the best thing you can do is go do a headstand or handstand. A passive strategy might be having a shake plate available to you. These things, you get them in Fitness World. They used to be more expensive, but they're not now. But I think they're like $70. And you stand on them and they like shake, right? 10 minutes of this, and it's so remarkably wonderful for people who have a higher threshold need to get that met. Interoception, if you have a low threshold and you need active strategies, having everybody be on a movement break schedule altogether is a way to build in meeting the low threshold needs of people, because it just gives them a break. They don't have to worry about it. They know it's coming. A passive strategy for somebody who has a low threshold might be when they're working to only do one thing at a time. Why is this a passive strategy? Because sometimes people expect you to multitask. And if you are somebody who has a low threshold, that can really raise your anxiety and be dysregulating at a interoceptive level. So one at a time for somebody who is low threshold. High threshold, an active strategy, mindful moments, make sure that you know what you need and you have a plan to get what you need, so that when you're in the moment of need, you can get what you can use your strategies. Somebody who has a high threshold and likes passive strategies is going to be a multitasker. They can do a million things at once. Why? The anxiety and adrenaline that is running through them helps them literally to focus by meeting their high threshold interoception need. How can you be an ally? I use this language specifically because I think that more people need to be an ally to themselves first, before we can be allies to other people. So the first step is to do this for yourself. Figure out what your profile is, do I like this? Yes. Or do I not like it? No. Yes or no is enough right now. Just claiming that you have an experience that you like and that you prefer, and you have things that genuinely dysregulate you and cause neurological harm. Like chronic dysregulation is no joke. So empower yourself to reduce the amount of stimuli that you have in the environment, reduce the demands that can be from other people. It can be of a task, it can be of a culture, it can be of a context, but really work to reduce outside demands. When somebody is dysregulated, the only person that they need to be responsible for is themselves. Another way is to offer sensory supports. Knowing your sensory profile helps you to really create supports that are specifically for you. But I'm going, that's basic. 1, 2, 3, reduce stimuli, reduce demands, and offer sensory supports. Okay. I need, Kate, are you ready? 5 minutes, because I'm going to invite a friend to talk. Rachel, are you ready?
Wow.
Hi. Okay. So, Rachel, I don't know are you on camera? You don't have to be.
I mean, yeah, my camera's on, I think.
I see you. Okay.
Okay, hello.
So everybody, we are going to have a chance for questions. So if you have things, put them in the chat. If I don't have a chance to get to them today, I will do my best to respond to them in some kind of format. I will figure that out. But I've invited Rachel here today Rachel was one of my first friends that I ever did the sensory profile for, this version of the sensory profile. And Rachel Dorsey is an autistic SLP, is awesome. Is my I love Rachel. So
Love you.
Yes. So I'm so glad you're here. But I just want to say, I wanted to ask you, how has knowing your sensory profile had an impact on your life?
Knowing my sensory profile, it sounds like I'm really trying to like sell, pitch sell everyone. Like, it was literally life changing, as in I think the like trajectory of my life is like significantly is gonna like have like shift now that I know what's going on a lot more, and I'm able to understand, particularly with my I always thought that I was a visual sensory seeker, or so I was visually needing a lot of active strategies, but it turns out that I visually need a lot of passive strategies, and just knowing that puts so much context. Like the last job that I had, for an employer, like it was very sudden, like, oh, we're switching an office from like this space to this space, and it was very sudden, and like that broke me, and like the amount of like, it was traumatic, and I had to quit. And it's like, why at the time, it's like, why is that causing me so much like, why is that so awful? Whereas that for other people it'd be frustrating, but like they deal with it. And knowing that it's like, oh my gosh, at a neurological level, that environment going from being at least predictable, not set up in the ideal way, to completely something I had no idea what to expect, like awful. So that's just one example. I think that in graduate school, like for speech therapy, we talked about sensory stuff somewhat, usually in undergrad, I guess. And it's interesting because we talk about like neurology, the neurology of it. And then separately, I learned throughout work that like about, the sensory system, and like, more like I learned more about like hyposensitivity and hypersensitivity, and really internalizing, like, these things are very separate conceptually, and really internalizing that like this is neurology, this is a sensory need. We talked a lot about like touch, and I have like a really complicated relationship with touch, but like right now I have like this thing that I like feels so good, and like I'm like rubbing it like on my face, and that just like feels so good. And I can tell myself that like like this feels good, and it I'm like honoring myself when I do that, because it just is me. It is my neurology. So yeah, that was a little all over the place, but it was just so good.
Thank you. I want to say thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, that's the goal, is to have people just understand that the way that they process sensory information is their neurology, and that your needs are real. They're like, dysregulation is a neurological event. So we have to be really careful of our brains. Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah.
All right, Kate. Hi, Kate. Hey. So we have about 6 minutes left. Any thoughts that you would like to offer, and are there any questions?
there were some questions about how you could be both have a high threshold and a low threshold. So how you could be sensitive and avoiding, I guess, in the same system. That's what it kind of read as.
Okay, in the same system. Well, I guess it's just important to reinforce that you have a preference for, or a set point, or where, like someone mentioned it before, like kind of like your body weight, like where your body weight likes to be. You also, your threshold has a space that it likes to be. And that can change and does change. One, two, the types of, so say for example, I think sometimes people get like a little bit confused with low threshold. Low threshold does not mean you don't like something. Low threshold simply means that you notice it quickly. And so in the sensory profile and in a lot of the literature, they'll say things like, they'll call people who have a low threshold and a preference for active strategies, they call them avoiders. And I'm like, it's just very negative language, because the reality just means low threshold and a preference for active strategies. That's it. And so just like there's things that you don't really like, there's things in specifically those areas you really love. And so what I think is that people are associating sometimes that really love sensation with seeking, but really it's a reaction to your threshold needs. When you engage in something, even just a little bit of something, and it's a low threshold, so much love. I call them like your sensory snacks.
Yeah. Yeah, what else came? Oh, there's a couple of people saying that they'd like to get their sensory profile completed with you, so it'd be good to tell them how.
Oh, sure. So I'm actually going to put it in the, so my Ko-fi, whatever you want to call it, link is right here. And so you're happy. I love tips. So if you pass the tip bucket around, if you'd like to pay me for my work today, I would totally appreciate it. Also on the site there, there's a space where you can commission me, which I thought was a fancy word. So in commissions, you can get a sensory profile report for yourself. In adults, I've also started adding sensory profile reports for pediatrics, for children too. But that's
Leah sorry. Leah was saying, you mentioned how priority is to focus on yourself in your sensory needs. How does one handle this in a work environment where you're expected to be on and go at all times? And for context, Leah teaches in pre-K and an inclusion setting.
Okay. So the first thing is that acknowledging that you have them is really the first step. It's just even noticing that the environment you're in is not supportive of your sensory needs, or is supportive, being curious about how, your environment is being supportive of your sensory needs. Identifying areas of change and really, or areas, I say, to refine or reinforce. So there's things that we can get a little bit better, and there's things that are working really well that we can do more of at a sensory level. So knowing those things and then enacting change, and that is hard. Like there's things that you can do, and there's things that immediately maybe you can't do, but there may be like systemic ways of changing your environment that need to happen.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how you make a cultural change. So pre-K's, I'm British, right? But we're talking about a classroom, little ones.
Yeah.
So how do you make create a cultural shift in a classroom where everyone talks about people's sensory needs? You start with talking about your own, so that you can teach those kids right from a really young age that they have a sensory profile too, and to tune into it rather than tune themselves out of it, so that they're not us, sitting in a webinar in some years' time going, oh.
You know what? And I think that I really like that, Kate. And the other thing I would add on to it is to make the process explicit. Like, I'm doing this because.
Mhm.
And also just acknowledging that, like, especially in a pre-K, oh man, I was a pre-K teacher forever. They are the smartest. They know themselves, and they let you know, and that is so precious. It's actually, we unlearn it. So I think maybe just protecting the space for people to express their sensory experiences and being explicit about your own sensory experiences.
Another question. How, I moved it. How does stop writing things for a minute. How does hypersensitive and low threshold differ? Does it mean that you could have poor processing or something that you notice quickly?
So hypersensitivity tends to more align with people who have low threshold. Low threshold means that it only takes a little bit of stimulation for the system to turn on. When people are talking about being hypersensitive, they mean that you respond readily, you respond quickly. And so that's most similar to low threshold, or low, yeah. High threshold is more similar to hyposensitivity because it takes a lot of information for things to register. And so people may not be aware the first, second, third, 10th time they receive the sensory information. Okay. Okay, any final words?
No, other than to say that the impact of understanding sensory like this on my practice has been immense, because I really learned just how inseparable psychological well-being and sensory well-being are, because obviously your amygdala is your sensory system, right? And I think trauma is a dysregulated nervous system, and if your neuroception, which is your sensory system that deals with threat and danger, if you're dysregulated in one system, you're likely dysregulated in lots of others. So what am I saying? It's good stuff. It's good stuff, and it changes lives and practices. And thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming. If we did not get, so I'm pretty sure that we're reasonably certain that this all does a chat. Yes, the chat does save. So go ahead, Kate. I see.
And prices on your site are in US dollars, right?
Prices in my site are US dollars. Today, so it's SP 2022 is a coupon code for anybody who wants, if you want to order a sensory profile report, even a consultation, it's good for 10% off. So I appreciate everybody coming today. And yeah, thank you. Woohoo! That's the end.
The end.
The end. Ending is the worst. What to do? Thank you. Welcome. How do you do? Oh, okay. This is my you're welcome. What's your you're welcome in sign language? BSL.
Yeah. It's okay.
Thank you. You're welcome. Similar. Kate, while everybody's saying thank you, you're welcome. Can you remind me of what my sign name is? You know, it's like.
So I can't see. But yeah, there we go.
My name is.
Hello, Kate.
Is everybody saying hello?
Yes.
All right.
Is it possible that we can get a recording, because I missed, I think, like 15 minutes from the start because of my network?
Yes, everybody gets a recording.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Just a reminder, though, the recording is going to come at the end of the week because I'm correcting the transcript and I'm going to be putting in the correct closed captioning. So.
Okay, no, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Okay.
So the last question, how do you use the coupon? It's in the checkout, there's an option to put the code in. So SP 2022. All right. It's over. I'm gonna do it.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.